Welcome to the Boldest You podcast. I'm your host, Carrie, and I'm thrilled to bring you real conversations with bold women and men. In this podcast, we dive deep into their stories, exploring what drives their courage, shapes their vision, and fuels their desire to leave a lasting impact. These are honest, vulnerable, and inspiring moments that celebrate what it means to be bold. Let's discover their legacies together. I'd like to introduce you to our bold woman of the hour, Rachel Schumacher. Rachel Schumacher is a campus recruiter at Eide Bailly. She graduated with her MBA from Moorhead State University Moorhead and has been with Eide Bailly for almost 3 years. Rachel was a college athlete and participated in the BOLD program through Eide Bailly before graduating. Through her connections formed during the BOLD program, she found the open opportunity for a campus recruiter and applied. She now lives in Bismarck, North Dakota with her partner and her pup, Eloise. Welcome, Rachel. Let's get into it. Hi, Rachel. I'm so excited to have you on our podcast today. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
Awesome. Well, to dive right into it, playing off the name of the podcast, can you share with our listeners a time when you had to be bold?
Yes, I honestly say that I'm probably a pretty bold person in general, but not all the time. I think I try to present myself as someone who's confident and outgoing, but there are a lot of times that I'm scared to make those bold decisions as well. I feel like one time that is definitely applicable to this conversation and our jobs and working together is being bold enough to just reach out to you on LinkedIn and ask a question. When you're a student, you're not always super confident in one, what you want to do after you graduate, or two, what things look like in the real professional world, or three, is messaging someone on LinkedIn even appropriate? Is it even okay? And so I look back at that time, and obviously we're 2-3 years almost in, and I'm glad that I did message you, and I'm glad that things did work out the way that they did, but also it was bold of me to just be hey, so I saw you're hiring. I actually can't start working yet, but would you be hiring in 5 months? That kind of thing. So I look back on that and I'm glad that I did that. Obviously that brought us here. And now we're here, on the podcast, all the things, which is
I
even more exciting.
know. Crazy to think, yeah, a couple of years ago. And I think you're right. So many students, LinkedIn is scary and we don't really know how to use it. Even as a professional, there's still moments where I think people question, should I reach out to that person? Should I ask them, that question, or should I follow up on what they shared on LinkedIn? And so that's definitely a great example of being bold, is sending that reach out. And look where it led to, a whole career that never would have imagined we would be here. So what led you to ask the question? You mentioned seeing the job posting and it maybe wasn't perfectly aligned with what we were looking for at the time or what you were looking for, but what helped you be confident and actually send that message?
Yeah, I don't know. I just think obviously I had met you before and I had met other people that worked at Eide Bailly. And so that also gave me the confidence to know it's a real person behind the LinkedIn little profile that I'm messaging. A real person's going to respond and say hey, either this is a yes or it's a no. And I feel like that's something I should take into my day-to-day life a little bit more, but it's also something that I can see on other things that I've been bold about, becoming a Pilates instructor. That started right because I reached out, I saw that Bismarck was opening a Pilates studio and I said, oh my gosh, that's something I want to do. I should reach out and ask, are they hiring? Are they training instructors? What does that look like? And so kind of taking that first step is always the hardest. And so now, even as I'm saying it out loud, I'm thinking back and being there are so many more times I could apply this to my day-to-day, right? Just asking that first step. It's either a yes or it's a no, and maybe it's a maybe. And that doesn't mean it's great or bad or one thing or the next. It's just kind of leading you on to that next step. And so maybe that next step was getting a job at Eide Bailly, or maybe it was becoming a Pilates instructor, or maybe it was any of the other things that I've done in life.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly, that first step that so many times, that's why we don't do the things, is because that first step is the hardest step to take. And I think you're right. There's also the people aspect of it, right? The knowing the people, and it's much easier to reach out to someone that we've connected with once or twice versus a complete stranger that we've never met with. But I also think of so many times in my life where that first reach out has led to really beautiful friendships or connections, or have gotten me to a place that I never would have imagined. And you mentioned becoming a Pilates instructor, which that's something completely different, right? I know after you moved back to your hometown, you were looking for something. So tell us a little bit more about what that experience was like, since it was completely different from what you do day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. I always kind of say my pitch during the intro Pilates classes as, I had finished running college track and I was excited to like get to still move my body, but really choose how I was moving my body this time. And I was looking for a workout that like still packed a punch, but was a little bit less intense. I was done with burpees and done with running circles and done
Yes.
being
Burpees are horrible.
yeah, I was like done being insane. And so I was really excited to find something that I really enjoyed, but was a little bit more slow and didn't make me so stressed out. Like I didn't want to be yelled at. And I had a great experience in college. Like I really didn't get yelled at that much, like
Yeah.
all those kind of things, but I didn't want to be yelled at and I didn't want the music to be too loud. And I was being really picky and I know that. But I found Pilates and I was just kind of super drawn to it based on like it's a little bit slow moving. It is like functional weight training. And I had done a lot of traditional weight training and really enjoyed that piece of college athletics and still do a lot of traditional weight training. But I love the functional piece because it's very accessible. And that's something I was excited not only to bring like to Bismarck, but just to bring into my life. Like it's so applicable in my day to day when I'm talking to my parents, like as they're getting older, or I'm talking to people around me saying, hey, yeah, like you might have something with that rotator cuff, but you could still do this movement. Or as I'm looking at my parents, as I'm looking at my mom and she's like bending down to tie her shoes, I'm like, you need to practice, being able to balance on one foot and tie your shoe just like that. Or when you're getting up from the ground, don't push on your one leg, like try activate your core, like stand up on your own. Those are things that are really fun for me to like get to bring outside of the classroom or studio, but it's really fun for me to get to tie back like my athletic career into this. And that's kind of the way that I teach too. I would say we've got tons of instructors, tons of different flavors, and I probably dive more on the athletic side of teaching in comparison to like the classical side, but we do a really great job of like blending those things together. But it was a long, intense process of becoming an instructor, and it was much more than I thought it was going to be. Like initially assumed it would be 2 weekends training and then right into it. And later I found out it was 500 hours and a full anatomy course and all these different things. Yes, but it is definitely really nice. I'm glad that there is that much training behind the scenes, and it does help me when I'm in the studio working on different bodies and making sure that it's accessible for everyone.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like I just got like a mini coaching
I
session
know,
with
I'm
you
like
there of like,
pitching it.
what
I
would
just like
Rachel?
feel the passion. I know.
No, it's fun to see it just, yeah, you light up when you talk about that and that experience. And as you were talking, something that was coming to mind for me was the difference between being the athlete and the coach, right? I do not consider myself an athlete in any sense, but those are
We're all
definitely different.
athletes, Carrie. We're all
You're right.
athletes.
You are right. But those are different skill sets, right? The person who's having to do the work versus the one who's having to motivate and coach the people. So what was that experience like? Like tell me about the skills that you had to gain when becoming a coach and even how you feel like those maybe have impacted other areas of your life outside of the Pilates studio.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up around coaching. My dad coached at the high school that I went to, and my brother coaches now too, and all of that kind of stuff. And so had always watched them really be technicians in whatever they are doing. And so had always admired that and saw that, but didn't really understand that there is like multiple different ways of coaching, right? You've got the technicians, you've got the administrators, you've got people that can do it, all of it. And then you've got people who are like just cheering you on. And you know what? Those coaches are personally my favorite because they get into my soul and I need a lot of encouragement. And so it was nice kind of transitioning and stepping almost like into their shoes and getting to see and kind of take some of the things that I've heard them talk about at the dinner table so many times throughout my childhood and be able to apply them like into my life, looking at different bodies and trying to almost cue. I will say Pilates is kind of a interesting workout because a lot of the time you're laying in your own world. You don't get to look around. There's no one that's an example. And so I always try to find the right cue for each person. There's 12 people in the studio and we do privates too, but 12 people in the studio, that doesn't mean the one cue that I give is going to fit with all 12 of those people. I might need to say it 3, 4, 5 different ways for that last person to pick up on it, or the second person to pick up on it. And so that's been definitely really challenging, but also definitely really exciting and applies to my real life, right? I say this in my relationships. I say this in my friendships, and even sometimes in our day-to-day job. You can explain something one way and it might just not click with the person you're talking to, but reworking that and like verbalizing it in a different way, maybe explaining the reason behind it. In Pilates, it's explaining the reason we're doing that motion or the reason I'm having them do this uncomfortable position or how it applies to their real life. And so like in our day-to-day, in our relationships, explaining, hey, this is the reason I'm feeling this way, or this is the reason we have to take these steps in order for this person to do this or to hire this student on time and that kind of thing. So I feel like that's the biggest thing, is like changing the way I'm speaking based on the person I'm talking to.
Yeah, the things I'm hearing you say in that were adaptability and the start with a why, right? There's a great book
Mm-hmm.
called Start with Why that I think gets at that concept of people want to know why you're asking them to do something. And especially in
Mm-hmm.
a workout class, right? Like,
Yeah.
why are you making me do this movement that maybe doesn't feel super great? It's straining my muscles or
Mm-hmm.
is making me get out of shape or out of breath a little bit. So like
Mm-hmm.
it's that why behind it. And the adaptability, which is a great skill in any career and any conversation, to be able to just adapt to people around you and to have a different conversation or to be able to explain something in a different way. That's I think such an important skill. And adaptability, I didn't say this in the introduction, but you are someone who has lived in a lot of places, a lot of environments. You Bismarck, and then you went to Mankato, then Moorhead, then Nashville, which I definitely think our listeners would find to be super interesting. And to be
Yeah.
able to do that, you have to be adaptable.
Mm.
So walk me through kind of that experience of, yeah, going from high school to then two different schools,
Yeah.
graduating, moving to Nashville, and just that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So once I became a senior in high school, had realized like I could actually do track in college. At the time, I did not necessarily think so, but it ended up working out really well and got offered a scholarship in Mankato and toured the school and just was really fascinated. Like I had toured Moorhead and Mankato, which is fun. And went to MSU and had a great time. Like chose that university based on the coach and had a great experience there, had great friends, had a great job, really enjoyed the track team, and my head coach ended up leaving. And that was really hard for me my freshman year. I had sat there as a senior in high school and said, like, you're too great to be here. Jumps coaches are never head coaches. Like, why are you gonna leave? Like, what does this look like? And he kind of promised me, like, nope, I bought a house. You're right. Jumps coaches are never head coaches. Like, I have no intentions to leave. And then I remember, sitting there when he let us know, and I cried for like 4 hours and tried to leave the track
Yeah.
4 different times. And he was like, okay, sit down, while the whole rest of the team was like airing their grievances. And he was like, you're the last one I'm going to talk to, because I was just crying the whole time, which, you know what, it ended up working out. And I ended up spending 3 years in Mankato and having a really great experience there. And I did end up transferring based on kind of a life situation and another time that I maybe needed to be bold. I'm trying to think of how I would word this. Yeah. Okay. So it's December after our first track meet, whatever. Things get a little bit crazy. We're all 21. So we've been out at the bars and everyone's been drinking. And there were some mental health concerns with a friend of ours. And I ended up being in my own home, being physically assaulted by one of my teammates. And that was a really tough time. I'm smiling through it now. I've like done a lot of work and I've come out the other side. I mean, at the time, it was a really dark space for me. I look back on it and I remember that everything is so different for everyone. Like when I look back at that time, I clearly know I was depressed. But when I was in it, I didn't know that I was feeling those feelings. Like I didn't feel like there was an option not to get out of bed. And I look back and I'm so thankful that that's the wave of depression that I felt. And I wasn't at that like 0, 1, 2 out of the 10 scale. I was at, like a 5. I could still get out of bed. I could still go to school. I am so lucky that that's the way that I felt. But at the same time, it really did knock me on my butt, right? Like I came from this, what I would say is like a perfect life, right? Like my parents are still together. I grew up class president. I was on the cheer team. I was running track, like all that kind of stuff. And so when that happened my junior year, it kicked me on my butt and it was kind of a wake up call. And just based on the way that our coaching staff handled things, I decided it just wasn't the right space for me anymore. And that was totally okay. That was like a full decision I was adult enough to make. And I was really happy that I ended up leaving and finding Moorhead and got to finish out my track career there. And you know what? It ended up being a blessing in disguise, right? Like I would have graduated during COVID and the job market wasn't what it was. I would have never gotten my master's. I'd probably be living in Minneapolis, like working a terrible desk job that I had no passions for. And so I look back on it now and I'm 100% confident, as weird as it sounds, that it was like somehow like God's working overall, got me where I needed to be. I had great friends in Moorhead. I had great internship experiences and great people that brought me to where I am now. And like everything comes full circle. Like I look back at that and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was like the smallest thing that's ever happened to me. And not to diminish how I feel, but really to just say like, I'm out on the other side. I can look past that. That is not a defining moment that is not the defining moment of the rest of my life. It is a defining moment that is a part of my life. And so cool. Whatever. We came out the other side. I went to Moorhead. I had a great time there. I did a year of undergrad or two. I don't even know. Honestly, I don't know. I finished my degree in Moorhead and then pursued my master's. Too many years of school, too many years of running track. Too many. And then, found Eide Bailly and lived there for a year before moving back to Bismarck and then doing a short stint in Nashville, which was really, really fun. I got to be there for 6 or 7 months, which is great. I had the time of my life, I will say. But now I'm back in Bismarck and also just enjoying it just as much.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. I think mental health, you know that I am so passionate about that, but it also is one of those topics that is so hard to talk about, especially when we are people that do live this quote unquote perfect or privileged life, right? We almost tell ourselves, well, I have all these amazing things and I have all these things to be grateful for. Like it's not that bad. Or, and I personally had a really similar story to you in the sense of feeling like, oh, it's again, not even recognizing that I was maybe in that state of mind until someone kind of pulled it out of me and helped me come to terms with, yeah, you are really burnt out. And honestly, you are maybe in a state of depression. And I think again, it's hard for us to recognize that in ourselves and to be able to get out of that. And I think you're right. There's so many moments where those things can define us and it can lead us into something really incredibly beautiful, right? You coming to Moorhead was the way, without that, we never would have been connected.
Right? Like,
And
that's what I'm saying.
yes.
I look at it and I'm like, it's full circle. It is hard though, like you mentioned, Carrie. I think as we've talked about before, like I know I'm a 12 out of 10 on the happy scale normally. And like, I know that you're normally pretty happy. And so when I was going through that and I was like, well, I'm only like a 5 or a 6 or a 7, like it's not that bad, but it is bad for me. And I think that's something with mental health too, that creates this stigma is like, I look back on it and I always feel like I need to preface saying my depression was this, because I never want someone to look back and be like, oh, I'm naturally a 7 on the happy scale and my depression is a 2. And so I always feel like I need to say it. And I know that's not how mental health works, but I will always continue to preface it just so that everyone feels included and that they're heard. And I know it's a deeper hole than we probably even have time to get into.
No, we could spend hours. And I think you said it perfectly there that it impacts everyone differently, right? It's a full spectrum when we talk about mental health that there's going to be times of our life when we're a 10 out of 10 and everything is perfect. And then there's going to be times of our life where that maybe isn't the case. And that does look so different for everyone. And so again, just thank you for sharing that because I really do think there's so many people that maybe have similar stories or have had similar experiences and feel this pressure to not talk about it or not share about it. And so I just imagine that there's probably a lot of listeners who are resonating with what you just shared. And to talk about the really amazing things, you mentioned so many great things in that time, right? The getting to a school that you were super excited to be at, making really great friends and forming strong relationships, getting your master's, which you were working with me at the time when you got it. And I still remember being like, how in the world are you balancing all the plates in your hands?
By the time I cried on a team meeting, and I was like, I'm so stressed out.
And we all have those moments. And then to watch you be able to flourish going to Nashville, which I know you said was kind of a last minute temporary opportunity. And when we talk about being bold, right? How many of us would have been presented with that opportunity and immediately said, no, it's not the right time. I don't have the time to do that. Or, I know you left your family that you had just moved back towards. So let's dive into Nashville because that's a fun topic. And I want to, our listeners, I think would love to hear more about that experience. So really, again, it's going back to that being bold and what was the yes? Like what really sold you on, I need to do this now. I need to move to Nashville.
So I had a mutual friend with a girl named Autumn who ended up being my roommate. And so our friend is a college friend. Her name is Joey. And Joey, so I had followed Autumn because I knew her through Joey. And, it's one of those social media things, right? I had seen Autumn post, like, I got to stop buying tickets to Nashville. I got to just move here. So I had sent her post to my friend Joey and said, if she moves, let her know I want to go with. Like, just
Cool.
Sent it out of the blue. And then we're like a year later, something like that. And I get a call from Autumn. We really don't know each other. Like, maybe we've texted a little bit. It's been a full year where we've been like joking about going and not going and like when that would be and if she would be doing some like traveling OT work since she works as an OT or what it would look like for her career versus mine. And so within this year, right, like I get a boyfriend and I have a serious partner in my life and I have these plans to move back to Bismarck and buy a house and all these other things. And so I get a call from her and she says, I got offered a job. Like, I think I'm going to take it. I'm going to move in September. And I'm on the phone like, dang, I want to go. That doesn't work for me. So I was like, okay, here's the thing. I can't go in September. Like, I have a lease in Fargo and I'm going back to buy this house. And I don't know, my boyfriend's like important to me and my family's important to me, all these other things. And I said, I can't go in September, but like, I do really want to go. And so how can we make this work? Whatever. And she luckily had someone else who wanted to go the first kind of 6 months of that lease. And so then I ended up taking the next 6 months of the lease and it just like worked out, right? I think it's non-traditional. And I think I've said this before too. I don't necessarily like stick to the status quo on certain things, especially when it comes to maybe like dating or what that relationship looks like with my boyfriend. But I moved back to Bismarck and then ended up moving to Nashville in March and just had some serious conversations with that and said, like just me moving to Nashville doesn't mean like we need to break up. Like I'm completely allowed to be there or we're completely capable of doing long distance for 6 months and figuring out like, if we can't do long distance for 6 months, then like maybe we shouldn't be together in the first place. And like, what does that look like? No, or maybe I go down there and I fall in love with it and I don't want to come home. Okay, well, maybe he moves down there, or maybe my family comes to visit, or maybe I sell the house in Bismarck, or whatever that looks like. But realistically, I knew going in, I was going for 6 months and I was going to be coming back. And that honestly made it a lot easier for me. I moved down there. I had great friends down there. My roommate was fantastic. We really didn't know each other, right? Like we'd exchanged a few messages and it ended up being this like beautiful relationship. I cannot say any bad things about her. Like I am so lucky with the experience that I had. We really could have just been roommates and we ended up being best friends. And I know that is not everyone's story with their roommate, but it worked out really well. And I moved back and I'm still just as happy, right? I'm not as happy with the weather now that I live in North Dakota again.
Understandable.
Yep. But I am like, me and my boyfriend are great. I have this great new best friend down there and I have tons of other really good girlfriends down there as well. And then I'm still here in my house. I've got my family and we just got a dog. So like all the exciting things. I think people thought I was going to really struggle coming back and I just didn't. It's life, it's choices, and it is what you make it. Like I was down there for 6 months. I had a blast. I did everything I wanted to in that 6 months so that I knew when I was coming back, I wasn't going to have any of these like regrets leaving or this and that and the other thing. I think 6 months was the perfect amount of time for me, but it doesn't have to be the perfect amount of time for anyone else. So like I say, if you're thinking about moving, if you're thinking about doing something else, or if you're thinking about being bold and switching careers when everyone's telling you not to, you might as well, like, yourself the best. Like, make that decision for you. I knew I was going to regret not going if I didn't go. And that would probably, unfortunately, I am the way that I am, create some sort of like resentment in my relationship. And I knew that the person that am dating is really great and we really have a potential future together. And so I said, I don't want to put that resentment on him if it's not his fault, right? Like, I'm an adult. I can make the decision to go and he can either just support me in that or not. And then we figure it out from there. Like we can work on these things together. It doesn't have to be like you're going, we're breaking up. There's no like steadfast, hard rule, whether it's moving away or taking a new job or getting a new car. I don't know why getting a new car would get you there, but I'm just giving examples here.
No, I think that's great. And I remember the conversations that you and I had of, hey, I think I'm going to move to Nashville. And I was like, that's amazing. Like, congratulations. And I think as you were sharing, something that I thought of was the what ifs, right? You mentioned all those things that you could have
Mhm.
convinced yourself, well, what if I move and we break up? Or what if I
Mhm.
move and I love it so much that I never want to move back to Bismarck and I want to
Mhm.
be here forever? Or what if I move and this roommate situation doesn't work out?
Right.
And so oftentimes we're telling ourselves all the negative what ifs. And it sounds like through that process, you were really good about telling yourself the positive what ifs. Like, what if I move and I love it and I have this great experience for 6 months and that's something I get to think about for the rest of my life
Yeah.
of these 6 months in Nashville. Or what if I move and I do love it so much and my partner loves it that he eventually moves and
Yeah.
we make this our new place to build a home.
Mhm.
And so again, I think the what ifs are oftentimes what causes people not to take that
Mhm.
first step, going back to that, because we just have convinced ourselves that all these bad things are going to happen. I know I am the worst at the what if game. I can make a
90% of the
full
time,
list.
I am too. 90% of the time, I am too.
Yes.
I
And
think you make a good point
also,
though. It is the first step. It is being bold.
and you going back to what we talked about at the beginning too, remember when you reached out to me on LinkedIn, like a very similar thing happened with Autumn, right?
Yeah.
And you reaching out to this person that you
Mhm.
didn't even really know and saying, "Hey, if this person decides to move, count me in. Like let me
Yeah.
know, let's make this happen." And I think there's so many moments like that where we see something, or even
Mhm.
I've caught myself like going to message someone because I saw something they posted and it really resonated with me, and causing
Mhm.
myself pause because I'm like, well, I don't really know this person. Should I say something? And how many times could that have led to a really incredible connection with someone? And so, yeah, I think it's just a great example for people of these bold moments in our life can lead to really incredible things and such learning moments of, hey, I tried something new. I got to have this really great experience that, yeah, you're only a few months out of that experience, but who
Mhm.
knows how that experience is going to positively impact your life in the many years to come. And the other thing, as we're chatting this whole time, that has really been stuck in my head is people, right? I can very much tell
Mhm.
that you are a people person and how much people have had an impact on your life story.
Mhm.
So, walk me through maybe a couple of those people that have really stuck out to you as like
Mhm.
big supporters or game changers in just your life story and to getting you where you are today.
Yeah, I think one thing to note too is that half the time we don't even know we're being bold. Like when you asked me that question, I was like, I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever been bold in my life ever. And now I'm looking back, I'm like, whoa, there are times that I've been bold. Like messaging you on LinkedIn, that's bold. Messaging and saying like, hey, if she moves, I'm moving. Like that's bold. And now I'm looking
Yeah.
back at it and I'm like, it really is those little bold movements that move us forward. But yeah, I think I have honestly really lucked out. Like I do really have great people around me and I am so lucky on that front. I am really close with both of my parents. I am a lucky girl who grew up being really close to her mom and we have a great relationship. You know, we talk through everything and I know that that is not everyone's story. And so I am really thankful for that. And then I've got a great father figure as well. Realistically, I do not have the father daughter relationship that everyone has in the sense that, you know, I feel like I am a mama's girl. Like I am not daddy's girl. I am definitely like more on my mom's side. But I know that my dad is a sounding board in my life. I know that like if there's something tough, he is the person I'm going to go to. And he's just someone I've always really seen as a hard worker. Honestly, both of my parents are really hard workers.
Mm.
And I think that's where I get a lot of my drive for. You know, I was hoping for maybe like wealth would be the thing that they passed down, but I guess hardworking is fine. It's a good skill to have, but I do look at both of them and they've both always had full-time jobs and then done a side project always. They've always been, you know, flipping
Mm.
houses or running an apartment or running us to practice or changing their lives to match our needs. And I really appreciate that and look back on them as they look to me now and say like, Rachel, you need to slow down. Like you don't need to be doing all these things and like this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, where do you think I get it from? Like you two
Yeah.
are the biggest contributors of this in my life. But outside of that, I have been really, really blessed with great friends. And I do have one friend that I always mention. Her name's Alyssa. And I wasn't always a great friend, which is funny to me now because I feel like I'm a good friend now. But I wasn't always a great friend. And when I met Alyssa, I wasn't a great friend. And I was just, you know, like selfish and young. And I met her in like middle school. So like let's cut me some slack here. But she really showed me what it was like to be a great friend. And so now as I talk to people about friendships and as I work with, you know, younger students or am talking to my friends about their relationships, I always say like to have an Alyssa, you need to be an Alyssa. You
Mm.
can't have a great friend if you're not a great friend. And so that's something I feel like that has come up time and time again in the last 10 years is like, I want to be a better friend. I want to be that Alyssa for someone else and show them, I've met tons of people who have said like, just like, don't really have great friends, or I can't get along with these kind of people, or whatever, whatever. And I always try to bring it back to that. Like, if you want great friends, you just have to be a great friend. And it seems simpler than it is, but it's honestly a piece of advice that I feel like has gotten me through life, or has really changed my
Hmm.
relationship dynamics with a lot of people, is like putting in what I want to take out of that relationship too.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that you brought up friendship because I think
Mhm.
especially in any phase of life, like friendship is one of those things where it's truly amazing to have great people. And when you're maybe outside of college or you're in a phase of change in your life, like friendships can be hard and take a lot of work. It's not something that
Mhm.
comes naturally, right? And we always like there's that saying that it's like you can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends, and your friends kind of become your chosen family. And I think when you think about that, like you all the things you just mentioned, yeah, maybe you have some friends that are a little bit more in a nice way low maintenance, right? They're
Mhm.
you guys can just catch up when you need to, and that's great. And then there's other friendships, especially in those beginning stages, where you really do have to put in that work to stay connected and to build a relationship, because that's what friendship is all about, is having that foundation. And so, okay, I love that you mentioned like Alyssa being a great friend. What does
Mhm.
that mean? What does that look like? What
Yeah.
are some of those characteristics that she is bringing that make you call her a great friend?
Yeah, absolutely. One characteristic that she has that I think you have, Carrie, is you're a very good dot connector. Like, if
Mm,
you meet someone who thinks that, if you meet someone and you're like, ooh, I really think that they're going to mesh with this person, you and her are the same, where you'll like make the introduction. Or it's like, hey, Rachel works in the Bismarck office and I just found out so and so works in the Bismarck office. Like, I'm going to send them a message together and be like, hey, you two should get coffee. Like, that's a skill
mm,
that both of you really possess. She does that a lot as well. I am much more of a jealous friend. I don't need my friends to be friends. I want them to just be mine. And that is a skill that I need to work on. But the two of you are much less selfish in that front. You're like, I want my friends to be friends. I want them to interact, and I want them to have relationships like outside of our relationship. So I would say that that's definitely a big thing, is like that kind of dot connecting. And whether it's like a podcast or something that's going to resonate in their life, or another friend, something like that. Outside of that, I think she just does a great job about like making things love and light. Like, it doesn't
mm,
always need to be that deep. And if you want it to get that deep, it can be. And she kind of balances her friendships in that way. Like, she's got friends that are maybe a little bit more surface level, and maybe some that are a little bit deeper. But I think something I also admire about her is she moved away from our hometown and still continues to come back and nourish her relationships here. She's got tons of friends
mm.
here, but also has tons of friends out there. She's built this really great friend group out there. And that just, again, like, speaks to her character and who she is, right? Like, she's going to put effort into the relationship if she finds it to be, someone that she really thinks is worth that effort. Like, she's going to put in as much as they're going to put in. And I think that that always ends up kind of being like a positive for her. I don't feel like she
Mm,
gets as burned on relationships, because she notices the energy that that person is putting in and then will match that. And I think that's also like what her friends are doing too, right? Like, they each put in different things there. She's also a very good event planner. So I will note that in the system. She's the hostess with the mostest. She loves hosting. And that is a skill I don't necessarily possess quite yet, but it is something that I admire. You like hosting too, though, Carrie,
oh,
right?
for sure.
Like
I would say every friend group
singing.
needs the one who's going to send
Yes.
the
And
invite,
I'm
get
glad.
people together. We all have our skills that we bring to the
Yes.
table.
Yes.
Yeah, I
I
think
get
so
nervous
many,
hosting, but you do a great job. Like,
thank
Friendsgiving,
you.
Canva invites. You are an event planner extraordinaire. We knew this, but
It is
I'm
one of my, I get very excited when I get to create like a themed something or other. But so many of the things that you just mentioned, yeah, I
mhm,
fully see that in friendship, right? And it is that space of, again, that ebb and flow. Like there are going to be times where,
mhm,
yeah, friendship calls for we're going through something really hard and we need our warriors to show up and support us and lift us up. And there's going to be times where life is great and we maybe just need to catch up and sit down and have a glass of wine and just catch up on life, or watch a crappy TV show or a Hallmark movie, right? Where it doesn't have to be this deep inner connection all the time. And it can look really different.
And I think getting older can be really challenging because you realize not all of your friends are going to be in your life forever. And that's like
Yeah.
still something I'm coming to terms with. Like that makes me
Mm-hmm.
emotional knowing like I won't always get to have these people for the rest of my life. Like
Yeah.
sometimes things just don't work out or you don't have capacity or something changes and it doesn't have to be one or the other or and one person doesn't need to leave it and have the other, it doesn't need to be this big blow up. It's just sometimes things change and that changes your relationships or what you prioritize in your friendships and therefore you maybe just don't have capacity or they don't have capacity
Mm-hmm.
or whatever that looks like too. That's just something
Yep.
I'm like still really figuring out.
I think everyone is
Yeah.
figuring that out, honestly. And I've thought about that a lot too, as I've gotten
Mhm.
older. And granted, you grew up in the same place, you went to
Yeah.
the same school with the same
Yep.
people. I moved
Yes.
around a ton, right? So I
Yeah.
maybe had more experience of that at a younger age of these people that I thought I was like, yeah, I know you in sixth grade. I'm gonna know you forever. That now
Mhm.
I couldn't tell you the last time I talked to them, or they maybe changed their last name when they get married, and I go, wait, who is this person, right? And some of those things like yeah definitely do change as you get older and you have some of those realizations. And I think I listened to a podcast once where I think it was Reese Witherspoon, who I love, Legally Blonde, is 10 out of
Yeah.
10, but was essentially talking about friendship in the sense of almost like a bank transaction. Like
Mhm.
you have to be able to put money in, you have to be able to take money out, where you need to be able to feed into your friends, but you also have to be able to take out. And it's that balance, right? Your bank account can't be at negative, and you ideally we all would love to have an
Yeah.
extra full bank account, but it's an everyday transaction. And hearing that and talking about friendship in that way really kind of opened my mind to this idea of yeah, are there people in my life where maybe I've just been giving and giving and haven't really been on the receiving end. And as you mentioned, it's an ebb and flow, right? There's going to be
Yeah.
times where I need to give far more to someone
Yes.
because of something they're experiencing or vice versa. But if we look at like over a course of time, has it been a fairly equal transaction? Have we been filling in each other? And I think some of it too with friendship, as our life change, our priorities and our values change.
Yes.
I do not have the same value system that I maybe did while I was in college. Like there was just things that were not as
Yes.
important to me in college that are so important to me now, or even the lifestyle, right? Of I used to be someone who had something going on every single night of the week, and now I am very content of, yeah, I still want to have social things in my life, but I also am so content to be at home with my husband, my dog, and my book, and find that balance. And I think when you have a friend like Alyssa, where it sounds like she can understand that too, of, oh, it sounds like this person's, priorities have changed, or maybe they're just in a phase of life where they need to step back from things a little bit and really just spend some time with themselves or spend some time with the people most close to them or their family. And knowing that that might circle back where that friendship then becomes a bigger priority in the future. And it's all an ebb and flow. And
Yeah.
I think so much of it we put pressure on this person. Like I know I used to be that person where I'm like, okay, if this is my friend, like people used to make fun of me because I had on my calendar a reminder to like reach out to my friends the first of every month. I had a list and I would go through and I would check, have I checked in on them? Have I done this? And that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself to then
Mhm.
maintain all of that, right? And in a more natural approach to it, it's haven't checked in with this person in a while. It's probably time to do that. Or, when something big happens in your life, that's a great time to reach out. But friendship can also span
Yeah.
cities, states, countries, all the things. It doesn't have to be
And it
this definition that we've created in our mind.
Yeah, it really is that banking example that you use though. Like sometimes and you have to know what bank you're going to for what piece of advice you need or whatever.
Yeah.
And sometimes like you have to break up with a bank and like that's not
Yep.
easy either. I know. I look
Mm-mm.
at Alyssa and I'm okay, technically we became friends in high school, I guess, not middle school. But I look back at that and my dad is still best friends with his high school best friend. And so I always
Mm.
tease, I'm like, that's going to be us in 30 years, like still high school best friends. But I look back at that too. And I'm really thankful that that's something that I am lucky enough to have in my life. Like not a lot of people I know are still friends with their high school friends or even have connections
Mhm.
with them or maybe moved away 10 different times and didn't have the same opportunity to get to know people as well. Yeah, it really, I like the banking transit, or I like that kind of analogy. That's good.
It was a good one. Yeah, Brene Brown also calls those our marble jar people. Those people
Hmm.
that, right, like we gotta put marbles in, and those are the people
Mhm.
that on the crappiest day, Like they are going to be the person who's going to listen to us. They're going to validate us. They're going to understand what we're going through. They also are going to take our stories and keep them to themselves, right? They're not someone who's talking behind our back or
Yeah.
sharing what we don't want shared. We all need those people in our life. And again, through our whole conversation today, I think there's been that common theme of you've been bold because you've had these really great people that have also been in your marble jar, supporting you behind the scenes and encouraging you to take these steps or these leaps, which I think is only going to continue as you continue on in wherever life takes you. I think keeping that just, yeah, people at the heart of who you are and the center of the experiences that you have is going to be great. So we are getting really close to time. I feel like we could just keep talking and
I know.
talking.
It's
Um,
traditional.
I love it. But I
One thing
always,
I'm gonna do is yap, and we know
oh, we both
that.
are. We know that. One of my favorite things, and this is not going to surprise you or probably most of our listeners, I love a good conversation card. I love good rapid fire questions. I think it can lead to really fun, just, yeah, learning more about people in a way that you normally wouldn't. So I have a couple rapid fire questions to throw at you. So the first one, what's your beverage of choice? What are you going to be drinking all the time?
Okay, I am on a Fresca kick.
I
If
saw you drink
you,
one and I was
yes,
like,
if
oh,
you
I do
forgot
love
about
Fresca.
Fresca, you need to get back on it. Fresca is, this isn't rapid fire, sorry. It is
It's
so
okay.
good. Like, I
It's so
do not know
flavorful.
how they make Fresca that good. I forgot about it for like 10 years, and now I'm fully on the Fresca train. Like, 2 cases in my fridge. Ridiculous amount of
Incredible.
Fresca.
What's your flavor of choice?
Any of them. I don't
Okay.
even have a preference. Couldn't even tell you what flavor I'm drinking. Fresca it is.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm a peach Fresca person if I
Ooh.
have it. And once it's almost like a if I have them in the fridge, it's dangerous because I just want to
Mhm.
keep drinking them. And I'm like, maybe try normal water, Carrie, but
Yeah,
they're so good. The
maybe
flavor
that
is
normal
so
water
good.
bottle. This morning I looked at my fridge at like 11 a.m. and I was like, okay, it's okay for a Fresca, but
Oh,
like
for
let's
sure.
wait until like 1 or 2 when I need a pick me up to get that Fresca.
11 is basically lunch for some people, so
That's what I'm
I think
saying.
it counts.
Yeah, it's
It's
fine.
water.
It's fine.
Awesome. Love to hear that. Okay, what's your favorite way to unwind?
Okay, maybe not a healthy choice, but I do like scrolling social media. It does help me like
Oh.
brain off, like someone's throwing content my way, and I'm just gonna like scroll for 5 minutes, regulate, do some breath work, and move on.
If we got access to your phone and your feed, what type of content will we see?
Yeah, you'll see a lot of stuff. I like a lot of like trashy pop culture kind of things. And I also love like health and wellness. And then I love like money tips, like credit card points. That is
Okay,
the
we're seeing
weirdest.
a little bit of everything.
I was like, that is the weirdest feed of all time, but those are like the 3 big things that I feel like I see.
Okay, I like to hear it. That's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, something a little bit more centering. What's something you're grateful for today?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. GPS. So grateful for GPS. I think about the fact that we used to drive around and like print out directions or ask people. The fact that we have maps on our phone, couldn't live without it. We
Yeah,
could.
it is one of
We
those
could.
things that we take. Could we? At this point, I don't know if we could.
I could.
The amount of times that we use it that you don't even think
Mhm.
about using it, or you get to a place where you don't have service and you can't pull it up, and then you go, I don't know how I'm supposed to get where I'm gonna go. But
Mhm.
that's a good thing to be grateful for. GPS. Yep. Okay, last rapid fire question. So, if you could eavesdrop on your friends talking about you, what would you want to hear them saying?
Oh my gosh, hopefully all good things. I don't know. What I could probably hear them saying is something about me loving to just like do all the things and never say no. I could hear them saying that, but what I would love to hear them say is like, and that's so great that she does that. I love that that fuels her passion and she feels fulfilled by that versus maybe them being like, she's got to slow down. We got to say yes to everything. But yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah. It's always fun when someone tells us, like, oh, you're maybe doing a little bit too much, and we have to have a little bit of that realization of, hey, like, what truly can
Mhm.
I balance? And I think there's times where, you and I have chatted so many times about our Enneagram, and we maybe
Yeah.
didn't get into that as much today, but having an Enneagram 3 where we're kind of natural plate balancers. We're doing all
Yes.
the things, we're working towards our goals, and there can be times where that's really healthy, and we have just, yeah, amazing things happening, and there can be times where we maybe need to take a step back, recognize our limitations, and figure out what's good. So
You function well in chaos, okay? That's what I tell myself.
yes,
And then I just look the other way because I like the chaos going on behind me.
we need something to organize. We're like, chaotic, great. Give me a list. I can make just
Yes.
beautiful out of this chaos.
Sticky notes.
Um,
Sticky notes.
yes. Oh, the sticky notes. I think I have in front of my desk here, I have a sticky note, my to-do notebook, and my like notebook that is all just, yeah, all the things. So I very much relate to that. But I'm sure that they recognize those talents within you and would have so many great things to say. So as we wrap up today, again, going back to the name of the podcast, Bold Legacy, I want to know, what kind of legacy do you want to leave?
Yeah, I think I have thought about this a lot, just going back with the name and the way that things are. And I think a legacy that I leave with my friends and my family and things like that is that level of being a hard worker. I talked about it with my parents. Like, I really admire that trait in both of them. I know at the end of the day, like, if they need to get something done, they're going to get it done. And that's something that I find like running true in my life. Like, we've had conversations about that and things like that too. And so I think that's really important to me, right? I want to be looked at as a hard worker. I want to be looked at as someone who can just like put their nose down and get the work done. But at the same time, I hope I'm always remembered as fun. Like, I think about situations and we all change and my life will change, but I hope that like no matter where I'm at, people will look at me and say like, even though she's a hard worker, or even though she's this, or even though she's that, like, she's fun. Like, she's going to bring the life to the party, and she's going to make people laugh, and she's fun to be around, and she's encouraging and inviting and all those things that are kind of like wrapped up into the small word fun. Yeah.
I
So I
have
feel like,
no doubt in my
yeah,
mind that is spot on for what people will say. And even just as I think about you and I describe you to other people, those are so many words that come up anytime, right? The hardworking, yeah, you are someone, and some of it goes back to accountability, right? Like, you're someone who, if you say you're going to do something, I full trust that you are going to do those things. And you are so fun. People on our team call you like the sunshine on our
yeah,
team.
that's
And
fun.
yes, you
I
you
know.
really are. And I think people will see that spirit through this conversation today too, of
Yeah.
just your life experiences, what you bring. And so thank you so much for being with us today, Rachel,
Yeah.
and for sharing your story.